and seeing those other programs, looking at their websites, I was like, oh, this is what would have been most beneficial for me.
What's up, y'all? Welcome to another video on Tea Time with Letitia. I'm Letitia, and in this video, I'm drinking this Oprah Chai tea. It was a bit of a glare, but I'll just read you the ingredients. It is a loose leaf tea, and it has cinnamon, black tea, ginger, carob pieces, pepper, natural flavoring, chicory root, red rooibos, cloves, and cardamom. All of these individual ingredients have their own benefits to them. And so you can imagine putting them all together in one tea brings a ton of different benefits, but I'm just gonna focus on the cardamom. Cardamom is a common season, I think, in Indian and Mediterranean recipes, but it's known to help settle upset stomachs as well as help to ease menstrual cramps. And I also want to note that today's guest gave me this tea, so I'm excited to let her introduce herself.
Hey everyone, my name is Nontalie Morrow. I am a recent graduate of the PhD in higher education program up at Penn State University, and so I'll officially graduate in August of 2020, but I just got clearance from the graduate school that my dissertation has been accepted, so that's exciting. But yeah, currently I'm physically located in Atlanta. That's where I'm staying during the pandemic times, but just enjoying being at home with family for right now.
And what tea are you drinking?
Oh yeah, so I'm drinking some pure peppermint tea. We drink a lot of peppermint tea in the house, and so we always have lots of that around. And
so in today's video, I am going to have a conversation with Nontalie about choosing your graduate program, making sure that you are in fact thinking of things that will benefit you, the person going into graduate school, and knowing that you're making a strategic choice that will essentially provide you with the best end goal or the best success at the end of your degree. What was your process in getting to Penn State?
Yeah, so so for reference, I started at Penn State back in August 2015, which meant that I was applying to PhD programs in the fall of 2014. And so at the time that I was looking, I really only applied to 4 schools. And I ended up choosing Penn State as one of them because the schools that I applied to were really selective, and my master's advisor was looking at my list. And she's like, I definitely encourage you to apply to more because some of these schools only have 1 or 2 spots for grads each year. It's not like my master's program, which had a cohort of over 20. And so she's saying you need to really branch out a little bit more. And she reminded me that the department head of my master's program graduated from Penn State. And so I looked at the program and their website basically, and, really liked what they had to offer. And then I went up, after getting admitted, I went up for a preview day where they had all admitted students come up to State College for a weekend and met some really great people and met some, especially the students, and really enjoyed it. And that's how I ended up, partly how I ended up picking Penn State, but of the schools that I applied to, Penn State was the only one that said yes, which you only need one, so that's fine. And yeah, I was there for 5 years. So fall 2015, and then graduating summer 2020.
Mm-hmm. So you said that you looked at their website and you looked at some of the things and you liked some of the things, and then you came to the preview day and you talked to people. Were there specific things that you were looking for when you were talking to people and looking through the website?
Yeah, so I guess I'll also give some more context. So my plan at the time, starting a PhD, I wanted to do that because I had the goal of becoming a vice president for student affairs at a college or university, or a vice president for institutional equity. And so basically working at the administrative side of higher education. And so at this point, you have to have a PhD to get into one of those positions. And so when I was looking at grad programs, I was looking at schools that had a presence of student affairs, student life, student activities, those kinds of things on their campus. And one of the things that I heard a lot from the students when I came up for preview day is that you can be really flexible in your, course of study or in your research. And if you have a specific focus, you can model your content or your course content after that. And so it seemed like it was a really flexible program, and it was also ranked really highly. Not that that meant a whole lot to me. As someone in higher ed, I know the background of those rankings. And so
that doesn't make me feel too bad. So when I came to Penn State, I was not strategic at all about coming. Like, I knew ranking was a thing, but I didn't understand. And honestly, I don't, until like you really just laid it out the way that you did. I still kind of didn't completely understand like what the rankings mean. Like, I just thought that just means that, you're the best of the best. But then that's just a general statement in a general way to talk about rankings.
So, and I've really been thinking about this the past week or so, because I'm doing some work with my advisor to update our website for our program. And she was asking me to we want to add a section for our upcoming and recent graduates. And she's like, why don't you look at some of our peer institutions and see what their websites look like? And I was like, sure, makes sense. So I go and look at our peer schools, and I was like, these programs are way better than the one that I just finished.
Wait, okay, so please tell me how, because even now I sit and I think about, like, if I were to go look at another program, I don't know if I would be able to identify like what things are better than another, because to me, like, a course is a course.
Yeah.
So yeah, please tell me more.
Yeah, so I'll tell you. And the main reason I have this awareness now is because of job searching right now. Or even looking at jobs, because a lot of universities are in hiring freezes, but just looking at jobs and thinking about what I know now at the end of my grad program, I really feel like I know how to write a dissertation really well, but I don't feel like I know that much more about higher education than when I started. Aside from my individual research, which is focused on professional staff at a university level and how they're involved or not involved in the change processes at the university, and what sort of power and authority do they have in the changes that are happening, specifically like big major changes at a university. Like, for example, if a university decides to change their undergraduate curriculum, what role do staff have in that? Typically that's pretty faculty heavy, but that can impact the work of staff as well. Those kinds of things. But aside from that, I feel like I haven't learned a whole lot about higher education. And looking at these other programs, for one, off the bat, they have a very explicit emphasis on student affairs in the name of their program, right? So my program at Penn State is just higher education, whereas some of these other schools are higher education and student affairs, or student affairs administration, or something to that degree. And for me, that would have been better. I didn't realize it at the time, but I'm now, with hindsight, I'm understanding that student affairs is really what kind of ushered me into this field. And so that's really home for me, but I didn't know that I was leaving home, so to speak. For me, higher education was just like, oh, it's general, I can be flexible. But the thing about it is, all of the faculty in my program are focused on faculty research. They're, if they look at the student experience, it's not so much student engagement necessarily. It's like, what's student research look like, and looking at it still from this very academic perspective. And I don't mean to dissect a university into the academic side, into the student affairs side. I don't mean to, it's not that simple. But in a sense, you could kind of boil it down to those kind of things. And being a part of student affairs is something that was really important to me, but I didn't realize how important it was until after I've been out of it for so long. Especially because Penn State, even the student affairs unit at Penn State, not talking about any of my academic stuff, but just the student affairs at the university, that division of the university is not as strong as the schools that I've been to previously. We're still very active and still large, but it doesn't have this sense of guidance and mentorship. It's very like, you know, kind of step up and figure it out on your own, which again, that wasn't the case for me as an undergraduate or getting my master's. Everybody was very much like, you know, we see Nontalie as someone who's involved, and we're gonna reach out to her and bring her in and, you know, mentor her and guide her and give her all the support and get her connected and all of that. And I thought that I had open expectations coming in to Penn State, but I realized that I still had expectations of what the professional culture would be like at Penn State. And so knowing that now, I would have focused on a school that had more like direct, explicit connection to student affairs. You know, their faculty are oftentimes practitioners too. They may not be full faculty, you know, but they are an administrator. They may be an assistant VP, you know, but they also teach a course in the higher education student affairs program. And so there's just a lot more direct connections and direct links between the academic course component of the program as well as the lived practical experience of the program. Because as a social science, right, education is not a hard science or a social science. My lab is really my work. You know, it's my engagement with other administrators, with staff members outside of the classroom. And so that for me here was not as strong. And seeing those other programs, looking at their websites, I was like, oh, this is what would have been most beneficial for me professionally. It's not to say that I didn't learn anything at Penn State. And I'm not walking away with some really important lessons, but I definitely think that I would have learned a lot more or developed a lot more, you know, in just my own professional knowledge at another institution.
Mm-hmm. So, correct me if I'm wrong in what I think I understood, but it seems like the other institutions had it very clear that their students work with faculty who also are part of the administrative unit. So like not only are you studying administration, but you're also teaching and you're also in the actual administrative roles.
Yeah.
Whereas something that you didn't realize until you got into your program is that the program is more so focused on just studying.
Right. Like my program is focused on really producing new faculty. Whereas that was never my intention. I never wanted to be a faculty member. I think some of those other programs, I look at their graduating students and it's a strong mix. They have a mix of people who are going into research faculty and people who are going into administration. And in fact, I was one of the only grad students in the whole time that I was here, not just in my cohort, but in all 5 years, where I had a graduate assistantship outside of the program. Most of my other peers had faculty research assistantships, whereas I worked in the Multicultural Resource Center on campus. And so that was very, very rare. Most of the other doc students had assistantships, full-time, I should say. Most of the other full-time doc students had research assistantships working directly with faculty because that's what they wanted to do. And so that's just something that, knowing that in hindsight, I would have spent a lot more time looking at what the students are doing, what the, you know, recent and upcoming graduates plan on doing professionally, and letting that guide me with, you know, what do I ultimately want to get out of this program, learning how to become an administrator, looking to see what students are doing who are coming out of that same program.
Mm-hmm. That I found really interesting is that we have the same issue in the sciences, where like though we're working to make that or to rectify that issue, but as of right now, like the people who we work under expect us to go into faculty positions.
Yeah.
And so everything is basically faculty geared, though, like I said, we're working to bring in more industry speakers and more speakers or people who did not go into faculty positions, though they did get their PhDs. And I would have never thought that that's an issue in other fields. So the first thing that I feel like you said that you would have looked at differently is the wording used to describe a program.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that in your looking at all these other institutions that has stood out to you that you've been like, wow, like I should have thought about this?
Yeah. So looking at faculty, looking at their CVs at some of these other schools, they're faculty who are doing research and practitioner work as well. So just in the same sense that you have practitioners coming in to teach, there are faculty who are connected with student affairs national organizations like NASPA. It's the National Association of Student Personnel Administrators. There are faculty involved in that, you know, and so showing that the faculty are not only doing the research, but they're also engaging in work outside of just the research too. And so I think for me, that's an indicator that the name matches the content. You know, that's how I can verify that the people who are largely responsible for advising and guiding my journey, my time through the program, are going to have full context of what the field of higher education student affairs is. And that's one thing, because everybody told me to look at faculty research. And at the time when I started, I wanted to look at like student of color, like retention and graduation rates for students of color. And so there were faculty at Penn State who were doing that. And I was like, cool, that lines up. But what I really needed is somebody who could give me guidance. Because to be honest, I had only really planned up to the PhD point in my head. When I decided that I wanted to pursue higher education when I was 18, when I was a freshman in college, I was like, oh, I have to get a PhD to be a VP of Student Affairs. Great, I'll do that. I hadn't planned beyond that. Don't ask me if I have planned beyond that yet still.
That is okay.
But yeah, I needed, and up to that point, you know, undergraduate and master's, I had that guidance and knowing that the faculty would have been able to have full context of the field. Because I also think I could have done more research, but I just needed that exposure. Like I needed people who understood my vision, you know? And I think I did have a very clear vision, but I just either I didn't communicate it well or it wasn't received well, or both. And so that's kind of how I ended up being able to look back and be like, man, what happened to all this time? 5 years just went by and I don't feel like it was well spent professionally. Again, I did learn a lot, but I didn't get the type of professional guidance that I really needed.
I think that is a really like good thing to realize.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something that you could have realized sooner.
I learned what I didn't know. And so now it's like, okay, just focus on telling other people so they can know. You know, standards and culture are in higher education and things that I want to continue and things that I don't, you know? And so I still plan on being an administrator, being a professional. I'm having to go back to some of my connections that I made as an undergraduate and as a master's student and reconnect with those people and kind of have new conversations around moving forward. but yeah, that's one of the things is like, I figured out a lot of things the hard way here. And so I want to make sure to be able to tell people so that they don't have to, you know, they can have more insight. Not, you know, people will go through their own journeys.
Okay. So can you clearly put in, like, I don't know, 2 short sentences or phrases, the two main things that you said that you would have paid more attention to?
Yeah.
Or tell your younger self looking for your grad program?
Yeah. For one, she needed to look at a program that had student affairs in the name of the program, but also that the faculty were doing student affairs work. And then 2, so looking at what work did they do while they were a student, but also what did they plan to do professionally after the fact? Because that informs what kind of guidance and training they got during their programs. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing tea time with me and all of your knowledge and information.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. I loved it.